you stop
Yeah,
it and
I
start it again?
restarted.
Because no, you need to stop it and yeah, now it's live. Okay, goes.
But is the screen? Let's see if it updates.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
perfect. Thanks.
So I no. Oh, I'm doing something else now. So I'm joining right now. I don't need camera.
No, you don't need a camera. Yes, yes, perfect. I mean, we can.
I haven't been since.
But this one works only if you talking close, and this one is like louder. And just
Can I just see one thing about the slides real quick?
Yeah.
for the first bit. Thank you. Is the door closed? Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone, to For and From the Baltic, Navigating the Future of Fisheries with Ecosystem-Based Management. My name is Marie-Julie Roux. I'm a marine scientist in Canada and vice chair to the ICES Advisory Committee. As you know, the Baltic is a shared vital resource for bordering countries and beyond. The Baltic continues to face multifaceted pressures from climate change to eutrophication to declining fish stocks. Because an image is often worth 1,000 words, I thought I would open this event with this artwork by Lithuanian artist Eureka Urbonaviciūtė. I apologize for the pronunciation. Because this picture evokes to me the elephant in the room or part of the elephant in the room. It may evoke something completely different for you, and that is why we are here today, to move from abstract to a concrete, tangible path forward to address the challenges we face in the Baltic Sea. Today we invite the elephant in the room, the elephant in the sea, to the front stage for the entire duration of this event. So without further delay, it is my pleasure to introduce Madame Charlina Viceva, Director General of the European Commission Directorate General for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries. And Madame will be followed by Monsieur Alan Heaney, General Secretary of the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea. Welcome, Charlina.
Thank you very much. I was a bit afraid when you were saying that you're going to invite the elephant in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed scientists, because for me, science is really a dedication and vocation. Distinguished guests, dear colleagues, and early career scientists. I addressed some of you this morning, and I'm happy to be able to address you once again. I'm truly delighted to be here with you in this very picturesque city of Klaipėda. I'm second time here because I have history of covering Lithuania in the Commission before. And it's a place where the air carries the spirit of the sea, and the community thrives on maritime tradition. So such a nice location for this type of event, because this location perfectly embodies the blending of a rich maritime heritage and vibrant academic community. And I was meeting this morning the rector and his colleagues of the University of Klaipėda, but also the marine research colleagues. So it's a very nice community with very good equipment, by the way, because I visited some of your laboratories, the right place to do this event. And I'm also honored to be in a position to co-host on behalf of the European Commission this event at the conclusion of the ICES Annual Science Conference. And I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to ICES and Klaipėda University for making this happen, for the excellent cooperation and the invaluable support provided to make this event today. It's a privilege to stand before you, so many dedicated scientists, and particularly again the early career scientists. I've heard that the week has been a resounding success, filled with lively exchanges and stimulating debates on the vital issues affecting our marine environment. Your enthusiasm and dedication are not only inspiring, but crucial to driving the progress we seek. Turning to our focus today, our dear Baltic Sea, it's undeniable that we are at a very critical crossroad. The region faces immense pressures resulting from us and our human activities, such as nutrient enrichment, the introduction of contaminants and non-indigenous species, but also important fisheries. In addition, and we discussed this all the day long, the climate change, which affects many aspects of the Baltic Sea ecosystem and exacerbates some of the existing already issues. These pressures threaten not just our biodiversity and our fisheries, but the very heart of our coastal communities. In confronting these challenges, we must think holistically. An ecosystem-based management approach is vital. We must go beyond isolated measures and recognize the intricate connections within our marine environments, including broader biological processes, but also social and economic dimensions. Again, something that we discussed prior to this event with ICES. Only then can we craft strategies that lead to genuine and lasting solutions. The Common Fisheries Policy, my favorite, grounded firmly in science, reaffirms our unwavering commitment to informed, evidence-based action. And I really feel comfortable claiming this, because there are not many policies that are so well grounded in science. That's why we are so dependent on ICES and the nice scientific community that is here in this room today. In light of the rising climate change impacts, the EU remains steadfast in its support for scientific excellence and innovation, and in our belief as Commission in the capacity of science to present solutions. In the current global context, this is absolutely essential. We are not so many key players that not only claim, but walk this talk. And what is absolutely essential is to remain convinced that the European Union, the European Community, the European Commission remains a reliable partner. Our strong partnership with ICES stands as a cornerstone of our endeavor to be science-based. With ICES' extensive network of dedicated scientists, we have access to an invaluable wellspring of expertise guiding our policy and decision-making process. You can't imagine how often, when we have the heaviest discussions in the Council of Ministers, and we are facing yet another one in October for the Baltic Sea, how often I'm using the results of your work. Together, we strive to unite science and policy for the sustainable management of our shared marine resources. And being also for 4 years in the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, I know that it is easy to say, but difficult to master this interface between science and policy making. Not easy at all, but if it happens, it can be extremely effective and so useful for society. So today's co-hosting event is also a testimony of the strength of the partnership we have and our trust in science. I was pleased to learn that ICES has been working on a dedicated science program for the Baltic, which could lead to the adoption of an ambitious ecosystem approach, and we discussed that as well at length. This represents the forward-thinking approach we need in order to tackle our complex maritime challenges. Should it succeed, it promises to serve as a blueprint for other sea regions, because we are also good at that in the European Commission, that we can pass good experience from one sea basin to another. Today, discussions represent a unique opportunity to join forces, and foster cross-sectoral collaborations. I encourage each of you to contribute your insights and your passionate dedication to our shared mission, empowering us all to drive meaningful change. And I would like also to remind to this audience something that is very dear to your heart, the ocean. We managed in front of the whole global community to demonstrate that for Europe, the ocean is at the top political priority, at the top of the political agenda. Because in the UN Ocean Conference in Nice, our president, which is the top level of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, launched our flagship initiative, the European Ocean Pact. One of the 6 key pillars of this flagship initiative is science, knowledge, and ocean research. So your place is highly valued, and we will expect a lot from you. In conclusion, while our challenges are substantial, our collective resolve and dedication are even more compelling. By strengthening connections across science, policy, and practice, we can ensure a thriving and sustainable future of the Baltic Sea and our ocean at large. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you, for your commitment, for your active participation throughout this annual conference. I look forward to enlightening outcomes of these discussions and actionable insights, and I hope for the best of our ocean, our seas, our coastal communities, and our marine science. Thank you very much.
Director General Vichva, Vice Minister Jagminas, Rector Razbadauskas, distinguished colleagues, esteemed guests, thank you all for being here. This is really a conversation, and I want to really thank everyone who's been involved in making this possible, everyone here at the university. This whole week has been an incredible success, in large part due to incredible contributions from early career scientists who really have been the core of this event, a core of this event. I want to thank our partners at the Ministry of Agriculture here in Lithuania. This is the first time that we've held the annual science conference here in Lithuania. We entered, Lithuania became a member country of ICES in 2006. So this is really a special occasion where we celebrate. Thank you. Where we celebrate our partnership with Lithuania. In 1902, ICES was created with the recognition that international and interdisciplinary collaboration is not only effective, but essential. Now more than ever, this is the case. The Baltic Sea is a symbol of our common heritage and a challenge to our collective future. For over a century, ICES has been at the forefront of scientific discovery and advice in this unique marine region. Our legacy is rich, from pioneering stock assessments to developing ecosystem overviews. Yet as we gather here, we recognize that the Baltic Sea's recovery cannot be achieved by reducing fishing pressure alone. The challenges we face, climate change, eutrophication, biodiversity loss, others, are deeply interconnected. The productivity and resilience of our fish stocks are being tested by multiple simultaneous pressures. Traditional single species management is no longer sufficient to address the complexities that we observe. This is why ICES, together with DG Mari and our partners, has championed the transition to a truly operational ecosystem-based approach to fisheries management. Today's side event will highlight that our science and advice must be adaptive, responsive, and deeply integrated with policy and society. We must move beyond silos, fostering collaboration across sectors, disciplines, and borders. We're working on to develop a statement coming out of this event that captures our collective intent to improve collaboration in the Baltic by supporting ongoing work, building research capacity by integrating all that we do, and operationalizing new tools and techniques. What do we mean by these priorities? First, we need sustained investment in science and coordination. We must support ongoing work with reliable long-term resources. This means investing in natural and social scientific capacity, in data collection, in the coordination of research, and in the integration of science and policy. Only with stable support can we deliver the knowledge and advice that decision makers need. Second, we need to better integrate our research capacity and strengthen our partnerships. The future of Baltic science lies in collaboration. By integrating the work of ICES, HELCOM, national institutes, universities, and targeted projects, we can create the knowledge needed to collectively and more efficiently manage the Baltic ecosystem. Third, we need to operationalize new tools and approaches. The digital twin of the ocean, integrated ecosystem assessments, and the ICES framework for ecosystem-informed science and advice, FISA, are not just buzzwords. They're the technical foundations for the next generation of management. We must operationalize these tools, making them accessible and actionable for managers and stakeholders. Above all, the recovery and resilience of the Baltic depend on cooperation among all Baltic states, institutions, and organizations and stakeholders. Our knowledge must be translated into coordinated action and interaction, reinforcing our common efforts and shared responsibility. Let us recommit to adaptive science, coordinated governance, and cross-sectoral action. The Baltic's future depends on our determination, on our willingness to innovate. Together, we can ensure that the Baltic remains a source of life and livelihood for generations to come. I want to thank everyone here. Special thanks to DG Mare for supporting and partnering with us. And I really am excited to have this be an open dialogue that continues work that we've been doing for a long time, talking about how we make the ecosystem approach a reality. And today is just another step in that road. And from here, we'll act and take what we hear today and take this forward and implement it in the years to come. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Charlina and Alan. A few operational notes for this meeting. So we're going to have 2 rounds of speakers on 2 grand themes. There won't be time for a question and answer session, but opportunities to bring forward the audience feedback throughout as Slido polls. Our first round of speaker will focus on recent science advances and evolving needs. So can I please welcome to the stage Mirjam van Tennen from the Leibniz Institute for Baltic Sea Research, Dave Reed, Chair of the ICES Scientific Community, Colm Lorden, Chair of the ICES Advisory Committee, Meri Kellas-Vuo from the Finnish Natural Resources Institute and FRO Vice President, Evan Molland from the Institute of Marine Research in Norway. Each speaker will have 6 minutes to present on recent science advances and evolving needs. So Mirjam, please come forward.
So, good afternoon. My name is Mirjam Fontaine. I'm a tenure-track scientist at the Leibniz Institute for Baltic Sea Research in Warnemünde. I'm honored to speak to you today about some scientific advances in ecosystem-based management. For full disclosure, my PhD was on marine spatial planning and ecosystem services, which is also the lens I am taking today. I would also like to mention that, there's my slide, that the points I'm presenting are research advances by some of my colleagues in an EU Horizon mission project called CDITO, and my take on how this research should be combined for improved ecosystem-based management. I drafted these 2 slides before the conference, which I will show now, while it's also highlighting along the way some of my key takeaways from the sessions and talks that I attended during the conference without even attempting to be comprehensive. The first scientific advance that I want to highlight is the focus on cumulative impact assessments. To understand the impacts of maritime activities and the impact of decisions that we take to plan for these activities, we need to understand their cumulative impacts. One innovation is to link the cumulative impacts of maritime activities directly to changes in ecosystem components. And one aspect that was stressed here at the conference is that cumulative impacts cannot just be additive, but also synergistic. And I want to add possibly also antagonistic, which is something that we should and need to include in ecosystem-based management. The second scientific advance is the focus on the supply of ecosystem services by the marine environment. Current research by my project colleague Aurelia Amos-Kaiti and co-authors aims at combining cumulative impact and ecosystem service assessments to better assess the effects of changes in marine ecosystems by maritime activities, providing a basis for marine spatial planning decisions and trade-off analyses. The third scientific advance I would like to highlight is the focus on the vulnerability and adaptability of coastal communities and the assessment of the degree to which coastal and marine social ecological systems are susceptible to harm from environmental, economic, and social changes. Such assessments can incorporate the dependence of coastal communities on marine ecosystem services when conducting trade-off analysis to inform decisions regarding the use of marine resources. However, there's still some knowledge and methodological gaps, and I would like to highlight several from my perspective and by mentioning some of the research I've seen here during the conference. I was very happy to see the mentioning of ecosystem services in all 4 or 5 sessions that I attended. I think the ecosystem service concept has proven to be a very useful concept to communicate the effects of ecosystem changes to stakeholders and also to evaluate the likely impacts of different scenarios or measures. However, there's still a lack of reliable quantitative estimates of ecosystem services, a shortcoming that was also highlighted by the latest HELCOM assessment, HOLAS 3. What was stressed here at the conference is that we better need to understand also the underlying ecosystem functions that are essential for providing the goods and services we want from our oceans. In fact, there was a call or proposal to move away from focusing on species and habitats in restoration efforts. Instead, the focus should be on maintaining ecosystem functions that could be carried out also by different species in the future. In one of the sessions this week, I've heard that we are just starting now to understand ecosystem functions in faraway waters, such as the Antarctic Ocean, or in deep waters, such as around the Azores. But to find and fill knowledge gaps, we don't even have to go that far. There's still a lack of knowledge and data of what is right in front of our nose, that is our shallow coastal waters. For example, how are nutrients and pollutants from land are retained and remobilized in coastal waters, in our lagoons and bays. There's as yet very little data in high temporal resolution to answer that question. Such knowledge, however, is needed to align policy targets of the Water Framework Directive and the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. And this need and should and can be addressed by more temporal high resolution monitoring in coastal waters, among others. We also need more data and knowledge on the vertical and temporal distribution of maritime activities and their impacts. Or in fancy words, we need to think about 4D ecosystem-based management. And finally, we need an evaluation of marine spatial planning, a point that was also called for here at the conference, with questions raised such as how to better integrate the human dimension in marine spatial planning and who should be evaluating the plans. The European Ocean Act proposes to evaluate and revise the Maritime Spatial Planning Directive, and to link back to the very first keynote here at the conference and the discussion afterwards, this revision may be a chance to rethink the relationship between the Marine Strategy Framework Directive and the Maritime Spatial Planning Directive, and see the latter rather as an implementation tool of the former, and not, in the words of one of the conference participants, as the silver bullet to solve all our problems. In order to future-proof and climate-proof marine spatial planning, I propose including evaluation criteria, such as intergenerational equity. This would involve assessing the extent to which marine spatial planning contributes to preserving goods and services, and hence also the underlying ecosystem functions, not just for our current society, but also for future generations. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So my name's Dave Reid. I'm from the ICES Science Committee. I'm the chair. And I've been given the joyous task of telling you all about the Baltic. Those of you who are very clever will have spotted I'm not actually from the Baltic. I'm actually a mixture of Scottish citizen and Irish citizen. So bear with me. I'll see what I can do to instruct you about the Baltic. I'm going to put this thing up first. And this is a classic. As you can clearly see from this, we're in trouble. But I'm not putting it up for you all to read it now, though a photograph would be cool. It's available on our website. It's a product of our Baltic Integrated Ecosystem Overview Group. You've got, oh shit, sorry. And I swore I wasn't going to do that. So you've got, down here you've got the social economics, the fish populations, the biology of the system, and various exploitation aspects and icing and so on. And then you've got the different pressure states in the system. Now on this one page, you can see everything that's, well, wrong with the Baltic, but also you can see things that are not necessarily going wrong. I'm going to focus mainly on the things that are going wrong, and I apologize. On here you can see, this is from, again, from our ecosystem overview. You can see down the middle are the pressures on the system. Over here are the sectors that are causing those, and over on the far side are the natural environment components that are affecting. Now, I'm not going to ask you to, I'm not going to run through the whole thing. I think really important is that the key pressure on this system, unlike almost any other European system, you can't hear me. I do apologize. Yeah, so unlike any other European marine ecosystem, this one is dominated by nutrient inflows, and we'll have a look at that. And there are more standard is the selective removal of species, fishing, and so on down the system. So I'm just going to introduce you to a few of these as I go on. Let's start with that top killer, if you like, that top pressure on the system. And so this shows you a chart of the a couple of nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus, going into the Baltic Sea. And when I was putting this talk together, I had read all the stuff about nutrient input, and eutrophication is one of the key pressures in the Baltic Sea. And I confidently expected this diagram to show a steady upward run, but it doesn't. Up to about 1980, we were pumping more and more in, and since then, presumably, government action and public action has reduced that considerably. But the real tragedy here is all that nutrient is still out there. It doesn't disappear. So you've still got a eutrophied system, even though you're trying to control it, which is not great for a forward projection. The next bit that is very high in the agenda, and then some of you guys in the audience will know a hell of a lot more about this than I do, but this is, I'm trying to read the room. Nobody's yawned as yet. And what this is the hypoxia in the system, and then also the total deoxygenation. So the hypoxia is the red part of this diagram, and the anoxia is the black. Now, what's interesting is that the areas of anoxia haven't increased very substantially over the last few years. But the area with complete anoxia has, anoxia, has gone up quite substantially. So you've got an area, still the area which is difficult for life is roughly the same size, but the area that's impossible for life has got bigger and bigger. All this stuff came out of the ecosystem overview. The usual culprit, the usual suspect, temperature. So what you can see in the Baltic is a fairly slow but steady increase in temperature. I think it's something in the order of 0.04 of a degree per year. That's 4% increase every year. So that is seriously concerning. What's important about this figure is not so much that trend, which you'll find everywhere, but the extreme events, the spikiness of the whole thing. And this is all from Mercator Ocean, all EU-funded collection. So the next slide shows you what that means in reality. This is the Baltic Sea on the 16th of August of this year. What you're seeing here, the increases of temperature are something in the order of 4 to 6 degrees in the darkest red parts. So you can see some of the coasts of Germany, Sweden, Denmark, Lithuania, the lagoons are all experiencing a heat wave at least 4 degrees higher than normal. And this is going to have drastic effects on the biology and the chemistry of the system. And this is also, believe it or not, a week and a half ago when I was developing this talk, this was image of the day from Copernicus. So we have in ICES a whole range of groups working on this stuff, and they are the ones who've done all this good work. It wasn't me, I just chair it. I have to stop now. So there they all are. Feel free to look up on our website and look them up and find them. And for the rest of it, I'll say thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Colm Lorden, and I'm chair of the advisory committee from ICES. So I'm going to tell you about some of the advice that we've been given on the Baltic Sea in recent years. Okay, so on the left-hand side, we've an image from our fisheries overview, which shows the footprint of fishing activities in the Baltic. You can see that bottom trawling is primarily limited to the Western Baltic. You can see that pelagic trawling happens all over the Baltic. You can see static gear fisheries are mainly in the Southern Baltic, but there is a key element missing. It's the small-scale fisheries, and it's the small-scale fisheries that have really been most damaged by the effects that Dave was talking about in recent years. ICES gives advice on around 17 stocks in the Baltic. When I put up this slide, I forgot we have merged the two place stocks, but we have 17 different stocks in the Baltic. And of course, again, that's not the whole picture, because there's a whole load of freshwater fish species that also interact in the Baltic. Ooh. Okay. In terms of stock status, I've put up something from our fisheries overviews, which shows the proportion of stocks that are fished below FMSY, which is the management target. So green is good, red is bad, gray is unknown. And stock size in relation to MSYB trigger. So you can see, when you look at it in an aggregated form like this, the picture doesn't look so bad. But if you look at it in a little bit more detail, and on the right-hand side, we can see the F over FMSY ratios for pelagic stocks and the B over BMSY trigger ratios for pelagic stocks as well. You can see that even though we've managed on average to get below FMSY, that some of the stocks are at really low levels. So on the bottom panel here on the right, on the left-hand side, you can see there's two of the pelagic stocks, Western Baltic herring and Central Baltic herring, are at really low levels. And this is part of the story that some stocks are doing okay in the Baltic, but some of the main stocks on which key fisheries rely are really suffering. If we look at the Central Baltic herring in a little bit more detail and we try to ask ourselves, well, what's going on? And why hasn't the stock increased and recovered? You can see on the bottom left panel the relative spawning stock biomass for the stock. And you can see that for the last 2-3 decades, the stock has been below the trigger level and hasn't recovered. And on the right-hand side, I've put up the ICES advice and the catch and the TACs. And you can see there that the catches and the advice have actually followed, the catches and the TACs have actually followed the ICES advice. So despite providing our advice, the stock hasn't recovered. So we have to ask ourselves, what has gone wrong? What do we need to change? And how can we rebuild the stock? And they're the types of questions that ACOM is asking itself now. There's lots of different factors at play here. There's quality of the assessment. There's changes in productivity. There's changes in growth and mean weight. We can see in the recent past that growth rate in Central Baltic herring was really impacted by collapses in the food web. And the forecast increase in stock didn't happen because basically the food web wasn't functioning as in a normal way. Another example is the Eastern Baltic cod. And the situation here is even more dramatic. On the left-hand side, you can see the trend in terms of average fish length in the catches over time, and a very steep decrease in average length. In the middle, you can see 2 lines on the plot. One represents the condition of fish, so how fat are the fish, and there's a picture of a very skinny-looking cod up above that. And then the other line is the maturity of Eastern Baltic cod. And you can see that has reduced significantly as well. And all of these factors add up to tell us that the stock is under biological pressure. And we now see in our assessments that actually natural mortality is a bigger driver of the stock dynamics than fishing mortality. So the question is, how can we recover this stock under such a situation? Just very quickly, I want to highlight that we also give advice for other components of the ecosystem. For example, the harbour porpoise and how to avoid bycatches of harbour porpoise, and even the impact of offshore renewable energy on the harbour porpoise. So my closing slide is basically saying that there are new types of management questions there that we're being asked to answer. Some of those are up there. Some of those have been discussed very actively at the conference. And this is going to require new thinking, a much more holistic approach as we go forward. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon all. So I come from the Natural Resources Institute Finland, but I am actually also today here as a vice president of FRO, which means that basically today I am representing 26 of the Europe's leading fisheries and aquaculture research institutes across 20 European countries. I have 3 main messages that I wish to share with you today. And my message number 1 is that we need to increase competitiveness and resilience of fisheries. We have seen many sudden changes in the last few years. For example, the war in Ukraine has had a direct and negative impact on the fisheries sector through feed supplies, export markets, and production costs. There are also clear signs that a regime shift is probably already occurring in the Baltic Sea, and that shows us that we really need to build on the resilience of the fisheries against both sudden crises and long-term ecosystem changes. And as my great colleagues here already showed you, we know that there is a tight link between fisheries and the ecosystem. And as Colm just showed, unfortunately, for example, the collapse of the eastern Baltic cod stock had very cascading ecosystem effects, and that highlights us that resilience requires managing the fisheries and the ecosystem together. Then I would like to talk a little bit about an emerging theme, geopolitics and security. I live in Finland, in the northern Baltic Sea, and Finland is basically an island there. We are highly dependent on maritime trade. And in today's world, we have to take into account the geopolitical tensions and risks in all marine sectors, including fisheries. And energy sector also, like we just heard. And then lastly, harnessing modern technologies is important because they can help us increase the competitiveness of the fisheries sector and also reconcile then the impacts that fisheries has on the environment. Then moving on to my second main message. We need to develop solutions for sustainable use of marine natural resources. We have to aim to more holistic approach by linking the ecosystem functioning, co-use of marine space and socio-economic aspects, and then try to do this all in the context of the triple planetary crisis. Well, not very easy, of course. But by that we could then promote the responsible balanced use of the marine natural resources. In order to ensure long-term sustainability and resilience, we must also better integrate ecological limits and then the socio-economic needs into the natural resources management. Then I'll move on to my third and last main message, that we need science-based policy and adaptive management. We really should foster multidisciplinary, cross-sectoral scientific advice. For example, as I already mentioned, socioeconomic data is not prominently featured at the moment. However, I really think that their use in fisheries advice is likely to raise to higher importance in future. Then the adaptive management frameworks can help the decision makers test, learn and adjust when building resilience in both the ecosystems and also in the communities. And I know it's not easy or straightforward, but we have to try to develop the common fisheries policy to move towards this more holistic approach and to better take into account the ecosystem changes and interactions between species. And one concrete act would be to better integrate the environmental directives into fisheries governance. And I would now like to end by acknowledging that the science background is very strong. A lot is known about the Baltic Sea and what needs to be done. And so the real problem maybe is not lack of knowledge, but lack of action. Thank you very much.
Director General Vicheva, General Secretary Haney, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to deliver a short talk here today on body size, mostly on body size and on demography in populations. And Colm Norden left off in the upper left-hand corner of his exit slide the importance of size structure in fish populations. So let's see. Okay, so I named my talk Lessons from Fisheries Conservation Science that might support this push towards EBFM in the Baltic. Let's have a look at one of my favorite beasts, the European lobster, held here by a national park manager in the outer Oslofjord. This is a very depleted population. Here you can see different trajectories based on where we corrected for technological creep. But we have seen wonderful rebuilding in these small coastal lobster reserves, small MPAs for lobsters. And there's been a great buildup of abundance and density, but also very importantly, there's this buildup of size structure where you see more older and larger individuals. So what does that mean? Well, one thing is that these big males, they appear with their disproportionately large crusher claws. And the large females tend to love these males. So in the MPAs, there's a size, so that there's sexual selection going on, where there's size assortative mating. The females can find the males that they want to mate with. Not so much in the fish population. Other surprises that we see is that although we have this buildup of abundance and density, lobsters grow faster in the MPAs. There's more frequent molting, and there's a larger size increase per molt. So you can see here that the probability of skipping molting in a given year is lowered in the MPAs. And there's also a larger size increase per molt. Okay. Colm also mentioned cod and the spectacular decline in cod and also in cod size structure. Here's a story of the opposite. It's where you have large females in a coastal cod populations. These large females, they frequent multiple spawning sites in a spawning season. So not only do they spawn for longer, they spawn in a larger area and they spread their spawning out geographically. Not so much in the large males, but they also tend to do it more than small males. One of the reasons why you invite a Norwegian to this type of event is that we have a history of a spectacular collapse in our Norwegian spring spawning herring that occurred from about 1968 to 1988, and then we had a rebuild in the 90s. And alas, once again, we are on a downward trend, mostly due to the fact that we cannot agree on sticking to a total allowable quota in the coastal state negotiations. But that's a different story. But Trokta et al. Have this wonderful paper that has reviewed histories about stock collapse in herrings. And I'm just going to take time to read some of this. Herring decline to lower minima, recover to higher maxima, and show larger changes in biomass. More prone to booms and busts than non-forage fish. Recovery times averaged 11 years. Recruitment failure is closely linked with low biomass. So there's a danger here of going too low in these populations. History has shown us that. Another thing about the more recent science, more recent news about the Norwegian spring spawning herring, they tend to spawn here outside Møre. It gives larvae a wonderful horizontal elevator along the coast. But recently, the population tends to spawn up here. We've known for a while that this is likely, but recently, Arild Slåtte and colleagues really nailed the story in Nature that when you lose large, old individuals, you might lose a memory of the most favorable or suitable spawning location. And especially, we here see how the 2016 cohort is kind of diminishing, we see how the 2016 cohort is taking over the population. All right. Herring, and back to the Baltic, the herring is actually an important predator. And we need large herring in the Baltic ecosystem. We need large herring to predate on the three-spined sticklebacks. And this is firmly grounded in science. Okay, my exit slide is a little commercial of the Horizon Europe project Marhab that I also represent today. And we are renewing this message of reconciling marine conservation with fisheries management, because we do believe that these messages of the trophic linkages and also the significance of large-bodied individuals in population, the demography of populations, is in fact something that should spill into fisheries management to a larger degree than it does today. With that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. A lot of food for thought in this first round of discussions. I think in terms of recent science advances and evolving needs, we've heard several solutions that relate to broadening the scope of both the questions we're trying to answer, but also the tools we're using and the underlying data. I heard twice, I think, the importance of coastal areas, challenging our perceptions, and Mary also told us about integrating directives, which I think is a nice premise to the next round of speakers. So thank you very much to our speakers. I'll now invite my colleagues Sebastian Valenko and Sarah to the stage for a Slido poll. Please welcome.
Yes, we're inviting you to take out your phones. And just as Marie-Julie said, I think that last series was full of food for thought, and we want to capture that so we can digest it later. So yeah, we wanted to pose this question, what you think is an important or a critical scientific advance that could help accelerate sustainable management of the Baltic Sea.
And then just so you know what's coming next, there'll be a series of 3 different questions altogether. So no more than 3, so this is an easy task for you guys to do. Yeah, that's excellent. So we've already got 26 typing in here. What the idea of this is that after the next set of panels, we will be also exploring some of the governance and policy needs, and in a similar way, we're wanting to crowdsource some of your ideas into here. So we'll run this for maybe a couple of seconds more, and then we'll start the next round of panel discussions.
Okay, as answers are coming in, I will invite our next round of speakers forward. Lina Bergström from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, Klaus Reed from the Danish Pelagic Producer Organization, Nils Hoglund will be joining us remotely from the Swedish EUMEP, Rudiger Strempel from Helcom, and Sarah Geichas, owner and chief scientist of Hydra Scientific and soon incoming ACOM vice chair. So our next round of speakers will be presenting in, I think you have 3 minutes, if not 2, each on current and emerging policy instruments, tools for Baltic recovery. So please, Lina.
Thank you very much. I am Lena Bergström from SLU Aqua Sweden, where I'm a researcher on ecosystem-based management. And I'm going to introduce to you here 3 potential, in my mind, and well actionable points for science and policy to connect around to improve the situation in the Baltic Sea. The first one here focuses on the full implementation of the MSFD. The Marine Strategy Framework Directive sets the overarching goals for the sustainable management of marine areas, but it only works if it's followed. So, for example, there remains a lack of sufficient policy mechanisms to explicitly assess and manage, and not the least restore food webs. It's clear that one of the central problems in the Baltic Sea is too strong disruptions in the food web and the worrying effect that this has on the ecosystem productivity and resilience. At the core, this also means being prepared to deal with the trade-offs that will arise and to search solutions to mitigate any necessary trade-offs. An obvious other one is to use the information that is available. What does it take for having the information already included? One part in this could be to reconsider the format for how fisheries advice are presented currently. The advice would need to make it easy for the users to learn about and consider ecosystem aspects and trade-offs. My last point addresses the need to connect across sectors to be inclusive in a transparent way. We've seen in a wide range of studies on ecosystem-based management that actions to develop mechanisms for trust is key. Many of these issues are very complex, both from the scientific and from the policy perspectives, and there is a need to be well prepared to explain your perspectives, but also to be prepared to listen to others, to understand the root of the problems and how to go on. So we saw a lot of scientific advancements already in this conference, and it's encouraging, and I hope that this discussion here today will also help us to advance in connecting these across sectors and all across policies. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon, you can hear me now, yes. My name is Claus Ret-Sparvoen, and I come from the Danish Pelagic Producer Organization. And for those of you who don't know what that is the pelagic catching industry in Denmark. 3 minutes to talk about management and co-management. It's really not a lot of time, so I decided to focus on 3 words. The first word, actually coined at the industry themselves, which I work for, and that is transparency. I think we need to become more transparent in our operation and on our fisheries. And an example here is what we have in the Danish sector, where we have a voluntary, full documented fishery. There's 2 reasons for having transparency. One is to get better data into science and into management. And the other reason, we also have to be frank about that, is to have proven compliance of the regulation and the quotas that has been set. The second word I'm going to talk about is patience and a long-term perspective, and that is more focused on the policy side, I would say. And I think there's also 2 aspects of patience. First of all, I should say that you shouldn't misinterpret patience as not acting or not doing anything. But I think it's important to realize that when it comes to science, then science doesn't always have the results right away. Often it will take a long time to develop new ideas and to collect new data and so on. And I think that patience is very important. The second aspect of patience is also that if you are implementing some regulations in a natural system like the Baltic Sea, it's going to take time before it's actually materialized into a positive trend. It's not like that you can lower fishing mortality 1 year and then the next year you're guaranteed that you will have higher recruitment or anything like that. The last word goes out to the scientific community, and I've decided to call it the best available science. And what I mean with this is that I see a challenge in the science nowadays, and the challenge is that there are being produced so much science that you basically can almost find a scientific argument for your position in all the papers that are being produced. And I think it is really, really important that we have an institution like ICES or STCF or anything similar where you digest the scientific information that is being produced every day and put it into an operational system. So it's just, just to say that in between science and policy, I think it's very important that we have organizations like ICES. Thank you. That was more or less.
Our next speaker is online. Please go ahead, Niels.
Hi, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you very well.
Oh, fantastic. Hello, fellow astronauts. Thank you for having me on this distinguished panel. I have to say I feel slightly the odd one out clearly here among such distinguished people, but I'll try to provide a little bit of a different perspective perhaps on the issue of actionable policies, or actually how to get there. I have a slide. I hope you can see that. I can't see myself or anything, so I hope you can. And it's a symbol, basically, of a key problem, which I think in a bit stands in the way of getting these more actionable policies or things on the ground actually happening to reach the change we want. So I think for me, the key question is really who's actually driving? And you know, who do policymakers or scientists think who's driving? And this is a very, I pose this question because I think there's sometimes a bit of a multi-layered confusion about this fact. That we seem to have a situation where policymakers expect science to provide the best available advice in relation to, say, CFP, MSFD implementation, you know, that it's fully in line with what is needed, etc. But you know, there's also this idea that science processes stands alone and should be independent and not steered, etc. At the same time, we have scientists in need of clear guidance to be able to provide what policy, you know, makers think they're getting, especially in a shifting policy landscape. You know, what should be prioritized, what should be answered, what exactly is the problem we're trying to solve, etc. So in such a shifting political reality that we're in currently, not just the ecosystem, as we've heard, Colm laid out a number of serious and dramatic changes that's really thrown off science, so to speak. It's rather important to keep in mind of who's driving and what they're driving. If we are to see the changes and the use of new scientific models and approaches, such as an ecosystem-based approach, we must break this confusion of who's actually driving. I think that policymakers should be really clear on what they want and what change they need. It must be clear that, you know, changes of what to include and take into consideration will simply not appear by themselves. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. It needs this very clear push from the policymakers. And I think it can be done. I think it can be done without being nervous about jeopardizing an independent science process and research process. But it has to happen to actually get some of these changes, and many of the things and changes that we've talked about already that's needed. It will not work with this image in mind and having two steering wheels. I think it's, again, if anywhere, the Baltic should be the ground zero for such changed approaches or process. I think we need to dare to try and perhaps fail. At this stage, we're close to not having anything to lose at all, kind of what we've been mentioning, or you have showed in pretty depressing slide. But like I said, from my side, I want to underline again that this vehicle right here needs one driver, and to start the process at least. Then we can have multiple inputs and drivers. In a way, that's what EBM is about. But it needs to start with a very clear understanding of who is driving and who is pushing for the change that we need in these new science approaches. Thanks.
Thank you, Niels. Rudiger?
Thank you. So now it is my turn. I got ahead of myself there. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here. I have one slide for you, which may seem a bit abstract and bloodless, so let me try and fill it with content for you. It's basically about two very important facets of HELCOM work. One is that we have the countries around the Baltic Sea and the European Union cooperating to protect the Baltic Sea, which, as we all is in dire need of protection. And this is key because, as we also know, if we have a water body like the Baltic Sea, surrounded by a number of countries, shared, if you like, by a number of countries, we won't get very far if only one country looks to protect it. We need to bring on board as many as possible, ideally all of them, but at least as many as possible. And that is what HELCOM has been doing for over 50 years. So this is what HELCOM is about. It's multilateral cooperation to protect the Baltic Sea. That being said, all of this would be to very little avail if we couldn't base it on very sound science, on a very sound scientific basis. And that's also something that HELCOM is about, because if you look at our structure, if you look at our processes, our workflows, and our outputs, it's all about science. If you look at the HELCOM organogram, you'll see that you have a governing body, a commission, which takes decisions and defines policies based on scientific input, which is provided by the subsidiary bodies, which is a weird word, but what it means is we have expert groups, 30 of them as a matter of fact, which provide the pure scientific and technical input, and we have working groups, which are the interface, if you like, or the link between this pure scientific input and the policy making that we do. And every policy document, every policy instrument that we develop is based on this science. That goes for recommendations, it goes for thematic assessments, it goes for a Baltic Sea Action Plan. So it is all about science. In addition to that, we also need to know where we stand. And for that, we do intensive monitoring at various levels within HELCOM, which is another element of science. And I'd like to stress one more point because time's running out already. We don't just stay within the HELCOM constituency. We also reach beyond that to the larger science community in the Baltic Sea. And two examples of this are, of course, one, our Baltic Sea climate change fact sheet, done together with Baltic Earth, so the scientific community. And then there's our science agenda, which is a rolling document trying to determine what the science needs are for the Baltic Sea, where we interact with the scientific community to let them know our policy priorities, which sort of links up with what Niels was just saying, and they then also tell us what needs to be done and what the scientific needs are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be asked to be here, and obviously I am not an expert in the Baltic Sea at all, but I am here to provide sort of an outside perspective from the US fishery management system. So I spent almost all of my 28-year career with NOAA Fisheries, working to support US fishery management councils, which is a very different system than ICES, admittedly, but has some common elements. And so what I want to talk about today, and I'm continuing as an independent researcher to do very similar work with the councils. So I just want to talk about some of the attributes of working together that may be transferable, possibly, to other systems. So what you're seeing on the screen is basically a scientific paradigm on the left-hand side, the loop there with different colors that talks about a process for doing ecosystem-based fishery management. It's called integrated ecosystem assessment. I'm not going to go through all the pieces. Probably a lot of people in the room are very familiar. And on the right-hand side, you see some boxes and arrows and some similar elements. And so this story that is from the US Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council is one where we took a scientific paradigm and we modified it together with the managers to make something that works for them. So it needs to be an adaptable process for it to be taken up in management. To give some of the sort of pre-existing conditions for this working is that this was a council-led process, not a science-led process. This was, the council had already gone to all of their stakeholders, asked 1,500 people, what do you think of our management system? Almost all of them from all sectors said we need to do more with the ecosystem. They were very clear about their objectives, that they did not want to replace their existing system, but they did want to use more ecosystem information within it. And so from that basis, they had the buy-in to start working with scientists and thinking about some of the tools offered in ecosystem based fishery management and an integrated ecosystem assessment. So the council has actually been through these boxes and arrows at least once. They receive an annual risk assessment based on ecosystem indicators. They have used that risk assessment to identify a high-risk fishery, completed a conceptual model for that fishery, and completed a management strategy evaluation from that fishery. And because this was council-based, it included social and economic factors, social and economic metrics, and was about actually discarding in a recreational fishery. So it doesn't sound super ecosystem-y, but it worked for them. And so I think what's ongoing throughout this is continued dialogue with the council and support with scientific information. And this council is currently very interested and completing a project now to further operationalize their ecosystem indicators into management. So I hope to continue working with them and keep on for the long term. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you to all our speakers. Lots of food for thought here. We heard about doing with what we have and fully implementing policies, reconsidering the format of our advice, the importance of trust, the importance of time scale, short versus long-term perspective, transparency, and best available evidence, the importance of clarifying roles to enable change, the importance of cooperation based on sound science and linking science and based on priorities, clear priorities. I think clarity came back often. And again, an adaptable system with the idea that using more ecosystem information may not necessarily mean replacing the current system also, but building onto it. Thank you very much to our speakers. I'll invite my colleagues again for another Slido poll on stage. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That was fascinating, and congrats to you all for packing so much into 3-minute talks. So the first question we asked you was meant to focus on science. I noticed just by glancing through the results that some of you started to comment on some of the policy needs as well. You can reiterate that here, because this event is really meant to focus on how to take what we know from the scientific perspective and translate that into policy. And it was pointed out previously that there is an evolving and changing policy landscape, and therefore an opportunity, or perhaps many opportunities, to think differently about how we build those connections.
Yeah, and we have lots of food for thought from the previous questions. We have 94 results already from the first one. So thank you very much. And just looking ahead here, what we're trying to do here with Sarah is to crowdsource some of these science needs and linking them to policy, and we'll work some magic over the break and try and get a few of these linkages up for you to maybe rank as to which ones of these science to policy links would be the ones that you would think would be the most successful for the needs of the Baltic Sea.
Exactly. So if you were in charge, how would you, what is the most promising connections that can build those, or the most promising potential linkages between science and policy? You can think about that over the break, and again, we'll pose it to you in a slightly more concrete way later this afternoon. And now, do you want to?
Yeah, so this is Jo, my line manager. So she's head of the science department. She's going to tell you a few practical things related to the event as well.
Hello, and thank you for the floor. Do I need which one? Okay. So, your Baltic needs you. Please come and join ICES, and here are some reasons why you should do so. On the right-hand side, we have a list of expert groups that you can join as some examples, and during the reception this afternoon, about 6 o'clock, I think, you can see some posters that give you a little bit more detail about each of those expert groups. So why should you join? First of all, to strengthen your science. It's an opportunity to develop new ideas, to learn new methods and approaches. Secondly, you can develop your network. We have 6,000 experts within our community in ICES. So that's a big resource for you to tap into. You can make new contacts, you can make new friends. It's an opportunity to strengthen your career on into the future. You can learn new skills. So within an expert group, it's a safe space, it's collaborative, and people will guide you and help you develop your science. We also have dedicated ICES training courses. It's an opportunity to increase your impact. So if you're working on the science side, it's an opportunity to help develop the science that can have societal impact and that underpins our advice. If you get more involved in the advice side, it's an opportunity to contribute towards the management of our oceans and seas. Finally, it's an opportunity to publish. And what scientist doesn't want to do that? So whether it's in ICES scientific publications or our cooperative reports or technical reports, you can also have opportunities to co-author or maybe lead a publication in a peer-reviewed journal. And there's a link at the bottom that tells you a little bit more about each of those 5 and will help you delve into our ICES website. So I've already mentioned the posters. The reception will be in the old university building, right across from the other side of the big white tent. There'll be people to guide you there. But now we're going to have a short comfort break, and it's an opportunity for you to chat about everything you've listened to, maybe catch hold of our panelists, and enjoy 10 or 15 minutes to just absorb all you've heard before we reconvene. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. So 15 minutes break, and we'll be back at 10 after. 10 to. Oops.
Vienas, vienas.
O kitas pažiūrėk. O šitas gyvas. Tai gal čia tavo yra tas, kur sakei?
Ne, čia būtų.
Šitas gyvas. Iš šito įmo, iš šito. O tas?
Ladies and Vienna, Vienna, Vienna. Vienna, Vienna, Vienna.
Okay, we'll start again. Thank you for taking a seat. So it's been brought to our attention that the agenda for this event was not on the Wova app, and so it will be uploaded, so you will be able to track back the speakers list. What we'll have now is a keynote, followed by a Slido poll, and a high-level roundtable before we resume, okay? So without further delay, I have the pleasure to introduce Anna Rindorf, Director of DTU Aqua and ICES delegate from Denmark. Anna will be giving us her keynote. Thank you, Anna.
Maybe? Yes. Thank you, and thank you very much to Alan for inviting me to give a keynote and giving me plenty of time to talk about some really great topics. So you saved some of the best ones for me, so thank you for that. So I'll talk today about transdisciplinarity, ecosystem-based management, the Baltic, and spatial management. So those are all the cool things, so thank you for that. Just to warn you a little bit about what you will hear about. So I brought on like yesterday when we went for the conference dinner, we were told to put on the practical shoes. So I put on the practical shoes, and I'll give you some very sort of practical things. I'll talk a little bit about transdisciplinarity and how it fits with EBM. Don't worry, if you don't know what it is, I have a slide on that too. I'll talk a little bit about where this may be difficult. So it's not all that easy, I'm sorry. The perfect storm, so the Baltic basically, what's happening there. And then some thoughts about how we can improve things in future fisheries with ecosystem-based management. So, first of all, transdisciplinarity and what's so special about it. For the social scientists in the room, I just chose this definition because it suits my purpose. There are other definitions as well, but basically transdisciplinarity includes mutual learning between science and society. It combines interdisciplinary science and processes for a better understanding stuff that is going on for a sustainable transition. So we need to work together across disciplines to understand what's going on. That makes sense. We also need to have a talk with all the stakeholders. So many different kinds of stakeholders, not including all of the stakeholders, but including representative of all the stakeholder groups. And finally, I think this is actually sometimes the most difficult point. We have to ensure that science remains independent. So it's not the idea that the stakeholders we invite into the room are making the science. It is the idea that the scientists make the science, and the stakeholders are mutually learning, and the scientists are mutually learning. So all of us. For ecosystem-based fisheries management in general, what's so special about it? Well, first of all, it includes the likely impacts of management on both ecological and social systems. So we can't just do the ecological system and it'll be fine. We have to look at the social and economic impacts. It also integrates impacts of multiple drivers and sectors on the whole ecological and social system. And I put this in, there was some other presentations during the week saying that if we do fisheries management, we only need to worry about fisheries. I think the Baltic is a very good example of why we have to worry about a lot of other stuff than fisheries at the same time. And why does it actually link to what I said before? Well, the need to include impacts and advice on both social and ecological system means that we have to be multidisciplinary, so not the natural scientists in one room and social scientists in the other one. And the need to integrate the social priorities in the process and also make sure that the advice can be used afterwards means we have to be transdisciplinary. So we have to involve stakeholders in the process as well. So that's good. We have the two. They link together. Actually, I think we're underselling transdisciplinarity, so you're getting a little advertisement here for transdisciplinarity, because we can actually get more than just ecosystem-based management out of transdisciplinarity. So the basic principle is that scientists don't know everything, and the non-scientists also do not know everything. They know different things. And that means that they have knowledge that we can share. So, for example, if you are a non-scientist, but you have your daily work in a marine environment, you can share input on what is going on in the ecosystem historically and right now. So what kind of changes do you see? There was a wonderful presentation on the human impacts session, so that was wonderful. We can think about the potential things that will happen if something changes and much more. So it's about learning, not about teaching the stakeholders, but about all of us learning and taking advantage of the knowledge of the other persons in the group. And for us as scientists, that means we get first warnings of new stuff. So I've very often found that when I talk to people outside the science community, they are going like, why didn't you look at this? Anna, it's been going on for years. And I'll first, of course, say, no, it hasn't. And then I'll check, and they are right. It has been going on for years, and it's time we do science on it. So it's a really good place to get new insights and use them in your science. And it's also very nice that your science actually gets used in the real world. So if you do it without asking anyone, it's likely you will make something that nobody wants to use in the end. But there are also some benefits that are not for the scientists. So for the non-science participants, it's about getting their knowledge included and finding stuff that may actually work for them in practice. So everybody learns, and we all grow by learning. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing you have to find out is who's actually contributing. It's not so easy as it may sound. So you need to find out who are the stakeholders you want to involve. And then the next problem is to get them on board and get them to actually learn with you. And this, I put this on because it shows very well who's actually participating. So it's on ecosystem services, it's a systematic review, but it's showing the percentage of participants, depending on their concern, how many of them are responding in the contacts. And you can see the serious concerned people are 100% responding. But then as you get less concerned, you actually respond a lot less. And the funny thing is that those seriously concerned people here, that was the NGOs and the scientists. So you're basically getting a picture of stakeholder opinions, which is not actually maybe reflecting what is going on in the broader community, especially not the ones that aren't really very concerned. And do their opinions matter, or should we include them or not? So there are a lot of things to think about when you're contacting whoever you want to contact to get them on board. The next thing is that participants must make an effort to learn. They must overcome their different backgrounds. So I spend a lot of time working with social scientists, and it takes a little time to get a vocabulary that allows you to speak to each other without being misunderstood. The same is true if you talk to fishers or other sectors and managers. We all have specific words we use, so you need to take some time to learn. You also need to be aware that if you are learning, you have to be ready to admit your mistakes. So we've seen a couple of talks about we are actually overestimating the catch opportunities for some stocks. And that means there is what we can call a scientific overfishing. So the managers in good faith are fishing what we said, but it was too much, it turns out. And so admitting stuff like that is really important when we go into the collaboration, because if you insist that we are perfect, it is not very easy to work with other people. The next thing that happens is you get out of this wonderful collaboration and everybody thinks you have gone native. So people think that you are now a friend of whoever you had in the room. And that is true for us as scientists, but it is as true for the fishermen and the NGOs. So if you go into a collaboration like this, when you get back home, you will be blamed by the people who weren't involved. So we need to somehow be aware of that and at least dress up people so they know that they will have issues trying to explain what they did and why it is the best solutions that they came up with. And it's not because they were bought by some other interested party along the way. Okay, so first we need to find out what matters in the Baltic Sea and what do we know about it. So I've put this up. This is the FAO guidance for ecosystem-based fisheries management, and that's because I have worked mostly on ecosystem-based fisheries management, so the examples will be from that, but they are general. So for the FAO guidance, we have human well-being, ecological well-being, and the ability to achieve this well-being as the three major components. So I'm actually still leading an EU project which collected inputs on whatever people thought was important to ecosystem-based fisheries management advice from a lot of scientists and a lot of participants from the advisory councils across Europe. We also collected information on what knowledge we actually have in science already. So we did a systematic review of the same topics to find out whether we had all the stuff they were interested in. And if we look at what came out, so these colors are basically representing different topics. The top row there is the sea-wise scientists, and the Baltic Advisory Council is the second row. And then the bottom row is the systematic review of the knowledge that is available in the published literature. And what we see is that we actually have pretty good agreement between the scientists and the Baltic Sea Advisory Council members on what we want to know. So we know pretty well what the color distribution is of that bar there. So that's nice, so we're not disagreeing on that. Unfortunately, you can see the bottom column there, or the bottom block, has very different coloring. So there is not a very good agreement between what we actually know and what we would actually like to know. And if we look at what it is that is different, you can see here that human well-being, so any kind of knowledge on human well-being, a lot of mention of that among scientists and advisory council, and then a very little bar in the end for actual knowledge. And you see the same for the ability to achieve. This is where we look at things like governance and impacts of other sectors. So lots of interest, not very much science on it that we can actually use. So it isn't that there is no science, this is percentages. So there are papers out there, just not as many. And the final thing that we see is that ecosystem and habitat impacts, so the impact on the bottom of what we do, it's not very well represented in the Baltic as well. And then you could say, oh, well, that's just the literature in all of the regions. We actually did this exercise for all of Europe, so we know that this is special for the Baltic. The middle block there is the retained species, so the species we catch, and the climate and environmental impacts on them. So there are a lot of studies on temperature, salinity, and the things that vary in the Baltic. Okay, so having not a lot of science on the ecosystem-based part, or at least more science on some parts than other, I went to what can we learn from other areas. And if you're a scientist, you can pay attention. If you're not, you can just trust me. We did a lot of modeling. So basically, we had baseline models in all of the regions, looking at mixed fisheries interaction, so the fact that you go out and catch one species, you also catch other species. We looked at single stock assessments, so it's basically integrating single stock assessments. And I think Doretta did a wonderful talk on this earlier. We put in environmental impacts, so is there an effect of sea surface temperature on recruitment, growth, anything else? Put them in. Put in some links to other models, so we could make sure that we had an overview of the changes in natural mortality, for example, and food web indicators as well. So we had links to other models. So all the models don't run at the same time on the same computer, but they're running with the same settings and input, so the results become comparable. And finally, we looked at indicators that were impacted by effort, so that would be bycatch of protected species and habitat impacts as well. We did some scenarios. So basically, we have 3 management scenarios. Do as you're doing now. Have the MSY approach implemented in a way that you stop fishing once you exhaust the first quota, or have a more flexible version of the FMSY, which is more what is in the multi-annual plans in the different seas of Europe now. So 3 different management scenarios and 3 different climate change scenarios, no climate change, intermediate one, and a bad one. I'm just showing the bad one because it makes more contrast. So, but we did the other stuff. You can find it if you look up. So, okay, so the first question I get a lot is, can we actually manage fisheries so we do not overfish stocks, even under future climate? And this table here, I'm just saying if it's green, more than 80% of the stocks were in a good environmental status, so they were fished below FMSY and had a biomass above the biomass reference point. If it is red, then it's less than, or orange, it's less than 80% of the stocks. And so these are the different scenarios I showed before. The different lines are different regions in Europe. And you can see generally if we were doing a very restrictive fishing management where we ended all fishing when we lost the first, or exhausted the first TAC, we would have a sustainable fishery. So we can manage, actually. And then you can wonder, because somebody Colin was talking about bycatch, can we also manage that? It turned out that mostly actually in the areas you get the bycatch okay, and the habitats okay, if you are just reducing fishing. So we can also manage that. In some cases, there are situations where we need to close specific areas to achieve this, but otherwise we can actually manage fisheries in a way that protects the ecosystem. So that's good news. We can also do it in a way that we have seen in history. It doesn't take, we had a presentation saying 11 years to rebuild the stocks. It doesn't take the same amount of time as it will take to rebuild the Baltic after nutrient loads, for example, or contaminants. We can do it pretty quickly. So good news, we have a lever and we can use it. So we can manage. If we go on the other side of the coin, what happens to the number of people we're feeding? So this indicator is about the catch change. How many people are we going to feed with the fish we catch in the different regions? And this is under current climate. You can see that if we have a very restrictive fisheries policy, we get a lower catch. So less people are being fed, but not all the changes are big. So we can also feed people. We might have to accept that we feed less people if we want to have a more pristine ecosystem. But then comes the unhappy part. If we warm up the waters, that is not true anymore. So basically, if we warm up the waters and we have a restrictive fishing management, we will have a severe cut in catches and the number of people we can feed. It is possible that there will be a lot of new species coming in and they will all increase and we can catch loads of those. But it is not something we've seen yet. And it's not something we see in the stocks that we're right now catching. So it would require some kind of change. So getting the status is going to cost you in the future unless we do something different than just fishing as we do and screwing on the lever of having more or less catches. Okay, so, but good news, we can do something. We might not be happy with the trade-offs we have to do, but we can actually control something. How about closed areas? Can't we just close some areas and it'll all be fine? So we also, this is a paper by François Pastadi, who looked at the effects of closing areas on fishing yield and a whole bunch of social and ecological indicators. And he had many different models in many different areas, so it gets a little confusing. I just picked out 3 plots for you. This is plots of bycatch, total stock biomass, or spawning stock biomass in the middle, and total catch to the right. So basically, the ones you want in the bycatch panel, you want all the changes to be below the dotted line, so we want a decrease in bycatch. We want more spawning biomass, so the middle one we want above, and we'd like to get at least the same number of catches as now, so positive or on the dot. Okay, so the different lines there, I'll tell you in a minute, but the different colors and the different shapes, those are the different types of models and the different areas. So I'm trying to say something general, so we can use that to learn something about the Baltic, where we didn't have a model like that. Okay, so first, if we look at the MPA, that scenario is basically saying, let's just close all the areas we've designated now as some kind of protected, then it'll all be fine. So if we do that, we get more bycatch in some cases, less catch, and less SSB. So not very good. And why is that? That's because we didn't make them for this purpose. So if we do a fit-for-purpose areas, we actually can get less bycatch, more SSB, and about the same total catch, maybe a little more total catch or a little less. So we can manage. And then there's another one where we include effort as well. Then it gets really good if you're an ecological fan and less good if you're a social fan. Okay, so let's just use it. Use what we know from other areas in the Baltic. This is a map of temperature change in the Baltic. It's the average rate of change over 30 years. So per year over 30 years, you can see there's a lot of red stuff. But you can also see that the red stuff is not, and the yellow stuff is not evenly distributed. Some areas are warming a lot faster than other areas. Okay, so that's not good news. Also for things that need oxygen. This is the change from the beginning of the 1900s to the beginning of the 2000s in the amount of area that's impacted by bottom oxygen deficiency. So anything that is light green and up to red is bad. So it's not looking so good for the area. This is the area that this is just the Danish EZ, I should say, so it's not that it doesn't occur outside. But the red area here has had oxygen conditions that means that more than 50% of the crustaceans are dead in the last 3 years. So all the benthos there is small stuff or young stuff or stuff that migrates very quickly. So different kind of bottom that you would have if you had oxygen. And finally, you have these marine heat waves that give you oxygen deficiency also closer to the coast. So you can see there's not a lot of space left here. And actually, somehow even cod are still recruiting. So you don't really understand how a species that needs to have oxygen and needs to have cool waters is actually managing. But if you look at the ICES advice, you can see they still occur. So young cod still occur in the trawl surveys, so we know they are there. Unfortunately, they don't get very big. So they stop growing and they don't survive until after age 3. They somehow disappear. So something is going on. It doesn't really seem we can regulate it by fishing because we are already having a zero tech advice. But maybe someone else is to blame. These are examples of cormorants and seal diets. And basically the red is fishing, and then they had different colors, I'm sorry. The blue is the cormorant and the yellow is the seal. And these are 2 different models. So we can say they now remove more than fishing, but we can't say exactly how much they are removing. At least not until Marcus up there has finished his PhD. Then we will all know. Okay, so what can we do to save the things that are left? We still have recruitment, so that's good. We still have growth continues to deteriorate, that's bad. We could do something about limiting nutrient load. The problem is that even though we are limiting nutrient load, the way the waters are warming means that we still get oxygen deficiency even if we have less nutrients. So it might take a little while to fix that one. It's not really easy to see a solution to the cormorants and the seals, even though I said that Marcus would fix it. Probably he's not fixing the actual impact, just how big it is. But we actually do have some fish, so it's not all bad. It's good to see that we have some fish that are surviving to spawning. We should do something to protect those. So I think we need to think about more than fishing when we talk about rebuilding and also temper our expectations. It's clear that if you had set every scientist down 50 years ago and told them this is all going to happen at the same time, they wouldn't have given the advice that they have given. The advice we got is because they sat in separate rooms and didn't know about the other stuff. So put them in one room and then be realistic about how quickly things will react. Right now, we don't have a larger cod where the surveys are. We know that because we're not catching them. But they must be somewhere because otherwise we couldn't have the recruitment. So maybe they're in somewhere that they can't be caught by survey, where there's oxygen in the water and it's not too warm. Those areas right now, you can't fish with a trawl, possibly. Maybe you can fish with a trawl. You can still fish with static gears, for example, and you can also still recreationally fish. So, and you can do lots of other things like extract sediment and put ghost nets up and all kinds of other pressures. So think about those. And then depending on Ude's talk and how we're doing with that, Ude, it's, we may have an additional refuge for cod in the wind farms, but we're not sure. Okay, so, because Lara is looking menacing, we're getting to the tasks ahead of us because now is where you need to do some work. We do need more knowledge. We don't need the knowledge that we have, which is stock assessment and temperature. So do some other knowledge, fill some gaps. We also need to show again and again that transdisciplinary research reflects unbiased science. It's not that we're going native, neither of us, not the fishermen, not the NGOs, not the managers, and not the scientists. We reflect societal choices by using this method. And then we need to try to get really transdisciplinary, not just a little bit. Not just social and ecological, but also other sectors. And finally, I'm sorry, but we need to prepare for new policy actors from other sections are not going to make things easier. Probably the more policy actors you have, the more difficult it will get. So lots of work for us. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and a lot of information in this talk. This is for you on behalf of IC's Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you.
And on to Sebastian and Sarah for another Slido interactive session.
Yes, it's this one. So, while you were drinking coffee, we worked very quickly to try to synthesize and digest the responses that you gave to the first 2 questions and pose some possible linkages. So some kind of real world, okay, here's what we really could do and focus on at the interface of science and policy. And we're going to ask you to rank them. This might take a minute or so. to try to think really, truly, which of these options we've put before you, and of course the list is by no means fully comprehensive, but amongst that list, what holds the most promise for getting us to where we need in the Baltic context?
Yeah, so those results from these questions, you'll have some time here maybe to answer them, but we'll be revisiting this question and looking at the results towards the end of this next set of panels.
Thank you. While the voting is happening, we're now going to have a conversation. So I would like to invite on stage Raluca Ivanescu from DG Mare, Ieva Zundiene, Director of Fisheries Department, Lithuanian Ministry of Agriculture, will be joining us online. Okay, sorry, miscommunications. Charlina Vicheva, please. I invite you to join me on stage. Carlo Boyan, IC's president. You're invited to, yes, thank you, to join us on stage as well. Let me just flip my page here. Piotr Margonski from FRO. You're invited to join us on stage. Wonderful. Rudiger Strempel, you're invited back on stage. And this time, I shall have a seat here with you. It's the musical chair. Yes. So we're going to start with a very high-level question, and we'll give each of our speakers here the opportunity to provide an answer. So the first and high-level question is, how can we better link science with policy? Charlina?
Thank you very much. How we can link the two? The best way and the most straightforward way is by having binding regulations. And this is what we have in the common fisheries policy. So we have to base ourselves on science, full stop. And it has to be the best available science, full stop. So from there on, the link is there, and it's inevitable. Whether painful, whether useful, whether both, it's there. So I think that this is the most straightforward way. But what is really important is to have a permanent dialogue, because ownership is grounded in mutual understanding. That's why we have fora like IPCC, so the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, where we put together scientists and policymakers, because we need a continuous, coherent process of getting to this mutual understanding, because it's not only that the policymakers have to understand the science, but vice versa. And during the day, I had a number of occasions to highlight how important it is to have the communication tools for this, because the two communities speak different languages, start from different backgrounds, and it is important for the rapprochement, for the getting close together, we need to make an effort to align languages. And the mutual understanding means not only to understand the ground of each other, but also the concerns and align challenges. So on one hand, we have a very good way, just put it in the regulation, and that is the straightforward way. On the other hand, it is absolutely essential to have a continuous dialogue, mutual understanding, transparency, and to engage in this dialogue, not just the policymakers and the scientists, but also the society at large. So it's not easy. I know it from my own experience. I know that especially the previous generation of scientists, they were able to dig into their own field, and they really didn't feel, very few scientists were coming out of their labs talking to the others. But now, if you want to be impactful, you have to go out and you have to communicate. The same openness is absolutely needed by the policymakers.
Thank you very much, Arlina. Common language and dialogue. Yeva, are you online? And would you like to bring forward your answer to the overarching question?
Yes, I am online. I don't know if I'm visible on the screen because I cannot see anything.
You are
And I
visible
hope
and
that,
we hear you well.
okay, very good, very good. So thank you for letting me contribute to this timely and important discussion. And thank you, dear Charlina, for the very good, I would say, keywords: cooperation, openness, and I very much like to add on this particular topic at the same tone. But first, I would also hope that you are enjoying your time in Klaipėda, a city with deep roots in maritime tradition and fitting location for this year's ICES Annual Science Conference. For Lithuania, it's both an honor and a responsibility to host this event. From our perspective, the question of how to better connect science with policy is not theoretical, it's essential. It shapes how we manage marine resources, respond to environmental pressures, and uphold our responsibilities within regional and EU frameworks. We operate within a robust but complex policy environment, from the EU's common fisheries policy, biodiversity strategy, to regional frameworks such as HELCOM. These instruments provide necessary structure, but to our understanding, it's not enough alone. We need agility, we need trust, and the political will to translate scientific knowledge into timely and meaningful decisions. We are proud of the science-based progress that has already been made, from nutrient reduction to habitat restoration to improved fisheries assessment. But we're also aware of continuity challenges, fragmented governance, underuse of interdisciplinary science, and the slow uptake of new knowledge into daily policy making. So I would like to highlight 3 key areas where we can and must do better. First, we must strengthen the institutional interfaces between science and policy. We must move beyond the old model of science delivers, policy decides. What we need is structured, ongoing dialogue, where scientists are engaged not only in assessments, but in co-designing policies and supporting the implementation. Lithuania is a committed contributor to ICES, both as a data provider and as an active user of its advice. We fully support ICES' role as a cornerstone of regional fisheries governance, and we see continued investment in science-based cooperation as essential to sound policymaking. Second, we must ensure that emerging knowledge, including climate impacts, ecosystem thresholds, and species interactions, is actively integrated in our management frameworks. This requires more than access to data. It requires institutional readiness and flexibility to act on it. To that end, Lithuania continues to invest and promote the EU data collection framework. This program plays a critical role in generating the evidence base for both national and EU level policy. We collect biological, environmental, and socioeconomic data And we see this a long-term commitment to responsible, transparent, and science-informed government. Third, and perhaps most importantly, we must recognize that regional cooperation is not optional, it's essential. The health of Baltic Sea fisheries is a shared responsibility. No single country can achieve sustainable outcomes in isolation. Science policy integration must happen not only within national systems, but also across borders, with aligned goals, shared assessments, and transparent processes. In this regard, I want to highlight Baltfish as a real success story. It's a working model of how we can achieve all 8 member states and commit to common position and goals. As someone deeply involved in the Baltfish regional process, I can say I'm not only a strong supporter, I'm a passionate advocate for this kind of regional leadership. In Lithuania, we remain fully committed to strengthening science policy linkages by building internal capacity, improving communication between researchers and policymakers, and actively engaging in regional platforms that drive collective action. Ultimately, our credibility and the effectiveness of our management will depend on how well we listen to science and how decisively we act upon it. Thank you, dear colleagues. Looking forward to the further discussion.
Thank you very much, Eva. Carl O'Brien, IC's president.
Thank you very much. Besides all the negative news that we've seen today and negative figures, personally, I've got fond memories of the Baltic states and the fisheries, which was formed more than a decade ago, and that was presenting the IC's advice. So I know the fishers and the stakeholders are very passionate about the area and the fisheries that they prosecute. So during those times, the current problems that we have are still here today, but it does provide an opportunity to do something different. We've talked a lot about marine systems, but marine systems aren't necessarily the solution to the problem. We've heard about limitations of the traditional single species assessments, so clearly changes to management are needed, and there's an inability to address the wider pressures driving the ecosystem decline. But it's not all bad news. We don't necessarily have to start with a blank sheet, and we can build on what ICES already has. But I think there is a need to not fool ourselves that looking at the sorts of problems we've looked at this afternoon will answer the question. And I will link back to some of the keynotes during this week. So the status of the Baltic Sea ecosystem has been said by a number of people. It may not recover merely by reducing fishing pressure. So I don't want to focus on the Common Fisheries Policy or MSFD or the Water Framework Directive or how we as scientists could link into those, because there are things outside marine which are problematic. There was a recent ICES workshop on nature restoration and recovery, and there were 3 valuable insights in that. The first one was the case of the Baltic cod, where species may not recover unless the degraded state of the ecosystem, particularly the lack of suitable habitats, is addressed. The second was the significant factor deteriorating the ecological state of the Baltic Sea was eutrophication, which a number of people have mentioned, and that's largely driven by land-based nutrient loads. And the third one was restoration of the sea will only succeed if matched by actions on land, which is why I'm keen that we don't just focus and silo ourselves into marine thinking. We need to think much wider than that. So I think managing a single sector is not enough, and that we need a system-wide approach and solutions. And I can see my Elliot in the audience, and I had included a mention to you, Mike. So something that you mentioned in your talk on Monday, that just looking at siloed solutions to problems, which is the way that legislation is generally developed, we as scientists shouldn't be restricted by that. We should find ways of crossing those policy boundaries so that our science is applicable to the problems at hand. So addressing fisheries alone, or shipping alone, or agriculture alone, will not restore the Baltic. That success depends on coordinated measures across the land-sea continuum, designed to reduce the pressures, secure the ecological connectivity, and provide the conditions for nature to recover. So by embedding the restoration into wider seascapes and cross-sectorial governance, together we can move from piecemeal fixtures towards building resilience in the Baltic system. So for ICES, this means actually establishing new links. So for us as scientists, and also further developing links that we already have, possibly with sectors that are traditionally outside our mission and our vision statements. ICES and the member countries are ready to face those challenges, but clearly resources, whether they're financial or human, will be necessary. But I guess my message is, as a scientist, we've got lots of policies. They're typically siloed. We need to find a way where we can link some of those policies together. And in the marine case of the Baltic, it may be very dependent on shipping regulations and things like what's going on the land. So I think in some ways it's not more science, it's also for us to find out what science is out there in these other areas. And I don't know what agricultural legislation there is. And I would imagine DG Murray may not know because it probably fits under DG Environment. And that's another issue about siloing policies.
The common agriculture policy is not with DG Environment, so this is a very alien question. But but in any case, there is a lot of environmental input there as well, because equally like fisheries, which is probably the most drastic case where the sector is and the industry is dependent directly and inextricably to a natural resource. There is a very similar case with agriculture, but it's not as dramatic as no fish, no fishers. So it's a bit different.
Thank you, Carl. Over to you, Björn.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, I guess so. Thank you so much. I would like to change a bit topic. Not entirely, obviously, but I would like to talk a bit about the communication from the science with the entire society, because we have relatively good links with the policymakers. We have some common grounds and goals, but I guess, from my point of view, we are losing the general communication with society, and we are losing this battle. I will give you a quote. I need to, yeah, it comes from the small booklet with the recipes to be prepared based on marine fish, and it was published in '46. It is in Polish, so I will give you my rough translation to English. The sea serves not only for transportation purposes, linking us with the world. The sea is also a food provider. Moreover, it's a very generous provider. In farmland, you have to work really hard to get the yield. The sea provides, not asking for anything in return. Moreover, you may take as much as you need or want, as resources are limitless. Those limitless resources are marine fish. So obviously this is not a scientific paper, and even not everyone was thinking that way in mid-50s or 40s of the last century, because, for instance, Ricker was publishing his stock recruitment model in 54 and Beverton and Holt in 57. But I would bet if we ask a random school kid today, she or he will be aware about the necessity of marine environment protection. They will be aware about the poor condition of at least some of the fish stocks, and they will never say that resources are limitless. So there is a progress, I think, but still it is the successful communication strategy is a big challenge, because the need or demand for really deep knowledge is shrinking. People are waiting or asking for relatively quick and simple and easy to understand answers. And you know, scientists, we are usually saying, oh, sorry, we need more data, we need some time more. And we have this rare gift of making almost everything extremely complicated. So I think that's one of the big challenges, the communication with society, to be understood, or to be, so to transfer the knowledge, science into the, let's say, common use. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Björn. Over to you, Rudiger.
Thank you very much. And of course, a lot of what I would have liked to say has already been said. So let me maybe add, let me add two general observations and then maybe two more detailed ones. So first of all, I'd like to stress that linking science with policy and overcoming the science policy gap has always been important. But I think it's more important than ever in an age of a triple planetary crisis and a geopolitical crisis that we're facing and that we're feeling very strongly in this region. And also an age which has been termed the post-factual age, when science is considered overrated by some. So I would say that science, the role of science, cannot possibly be overrated in solid policymaking. That's the first observation. The second observation is that in this regard, I think we are blessed in the Baltic Sea region. And I was explaining earlier how HELCOM interacts with scientists and what mechanisms we have. So actually that is happening, and it's I think, a fortunate situation that we have in the Baltic Sea, which isn't to say that we can't improve. Now, if we want to improve and if we want to continue this, this link, and this has been mentioned, we need to overcome silo mentalities. This doesn't just mean between policymakers and the scientific sector, but it also means between scientific silos as well. So we need this transdisciplinarity. I think that is really, really important. Another factor is that I think it's really good to talk to one another, but it's not enough to talk to each other. We also need to listen to each other. And that also implies, of course, that scientists are allowed to speak truth to power, and power accepts that. But then it also means that scientists will accept that not everything they say will immediately be taken on board, because, of course, policymakers are subject to certain constraints that scientists aren't, and it can't always be basically immediately replicated. So that's another important factor. And finally, one thing that I find very important is creating an enabling environment. So we need fora where scientists and policymakers can interact, and we need, and of course that's almost a dirty word, but we need funding, because there's a price tag attached to this, and we need to be able to have these fora, and we need to be able to fund them. And those are some of the points that I'd like to raise here, in addition to maybe what was already said. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've heard the words communication very much, dialogue, the importance of learning. I think that resonates with Anna's keynote as well. To engage the broader society also in the process. And I think the aspect of the communication piece across timescales is very important. And I think that relates to what we just heard. How do we effectively communicate the risks at this moment from a science perspective versus the future ones? To ensure that those remain on the radar of decision makers. Carl, you talked about the broadening the scope of the science we do. The next question is kind of related to that. And it reads like this: since much of IC science is still rooted in single species stock assessments, how can we accelerate the shift towards ecosystem-based management in practice? It's an open question, so you're welcome to answer, Charlina, or pass the mic.
Yeah, thank you. I can start. And actually, most of our talk with the ICES team was exactly about how to make this shift. I would not say paradigm shift, because it's a progressive work, and I will start by saying that it is not that we abruptly shift from one to the other, because in a lot of the ICES advice, there are already ecosystem-based approach elements. We are absolutely clear that the interlinkages between the species within the overall ecosystem are so important that they cannot be neglected. So for this, for example, there is a permanent endeavor to include in the models. These are the tools which the scientists use in order to come out with feeding them with data that we provide and we all provide to come out with predictions about the biomass and so on. So these are the assessments that come to us. So in these models, there are these interlinkages and elements of the ecosystem-based approach. So the more we have out there, the more the ecosystem-based approach will be embedded in even the single stock assessments. I have here a figure that was given by my colleagues, but of course the ICES can correct me. So according to our information, 70% of the stocks already integrate ecosystem considerations. So this is to reassure you that it's not a jump that we have to make now. So the first thing is about the models, but of course, these models, they have to be fed, and we know that you know, there is you know, a nice phrase that the modelers are using: rubbish in, rubbish out. So that refers to the data. So if the data is not good, then we are missing the point, because we start the exercise on the wrong footing. So on this side, the European Union does a lot. But talking about the models, I have to tell you, I cannot miss saying it. When I was in the Joint Research Center for 4 years, actually this house, Powerhouse, which is a scientific house, but it provides evidence for policymaking. So it runs 100 models, and many of these are biophysical. So they really serve this type of work that can be applied, and I'm sure that probably there could be a lot of discussions on the modeling side. Now, on the data collection side, the same way as the common fisheries policy, and I said it very clearly, is based on the best available scientific advice, it is also based on data. So we have deep-rooted for many years data collection legal base, data collection framework directive, but also this morning we were discussing also the control regulation, which also is based on monitoring and reporting, which is based on data. So in order to feed these models where ecosystem-based approach will be implemented, we need the specific data that will make it. So we are working on that as well, and we can always improve, and we are always open to hear how we can best serve the data necessity, the data need, so we can implement at the end a fully fledged ecosystem-based approach. Then we heard a lot about the cross-sector approach, and one of the things that, so I'm not going to repeat this, but I just want to tell you that now we are fully engaged into one of the highlight deliverables of the European Ocean Pact, and this is an Ocean Act. So we have to see, it has to be based, but not necessarily lonely, and it won't be the lonely and only element, the review of the Maritime Spatial Planning Directive. I saw the first presentation actually of our event was a very nice presentation. I would wish to have it. So if the owner of it is there, please send it to me, because it was exactly speaking about the discussions that are taking place now in the Mare Strategic Head, how to put together the MSP, the Maritime Spatial Planning Directive, to embed the ecosystem-based approach, to have the column, the water column, and not only the water surface, how to embed the ocean observation, which is a very important initiative, into this endeavor, how to employ the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. So exactly what I saw on the slides of the first presentation, bravo. So we are thinking the same way. The cross-sectoral element is also taking on board the socioeconomics, and many of you talked about that. This is essential. It also links to the fact that not everything from science can be immediately implemented in policy, and there the socioeconomics is absolutely vital in order to have the mutual understanding why not and why yes. So all these are things that we are taking care of. and we are trying to be helpful also to the scientific community. But I want to also say a couple of 2 or 3 things more. So the first thing is that we are in a process of evaluating the common fisheries policy, and I see many faces here that I know that have contributed to the public consultation, and thank you very much. But if in the meantime any more bright ideas came to your head, or you read some articles, or something, you know, an apple fell on your head, please, it's not too late. We really need to think how we can improve the CFP, and especially on the side of the scientific advice, and how exactly, because we know we have to embed the ecosystem-based approach. Please help us with the how. So this is what we want to hear from you. So participate in this process. There is still time. The window is very little open still, so that you can feed us with what you think. The second thing that I would like to mention is that in the European Ocean Pact, we have really a secured space for science. So feed us with the knowledge gaps and prioritize your needs so that we can take them really in priority for a question like this: the how of embedding the ecosystem-based approach, not only for the fisheries assessment, but also in the broader thinking of how we plan our activities at sea. So a lot is out there. We are doing our best. You talked about funding. There is no better purse than the European budget. I was really happy. I hope that this will be the case. In our proposal, actually, you've seen that the funding for science is not reduced. But thank you very much, because I hear the publicity also of a Horizon project, not necessarily from someone coming from a member state, but also from outside, because we are very open. We want to promote cooperation in order to get much more about the how and make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, we all know why we are here, and addressing the how is very important. Thank you for this intervention. Carl, how can we accelerate the shift towards ecosystem-based management in practice?
Well, I'd like to pick up on a phrase that Charlene used, which was using the best available science. The EU and the other requesters of advice to ICs, generally speaking, don't tell us which models to run. We have chosen to carry on for centuries to run single species models, or decades, and we're still running them. So we as scientists are the real impediment to you actually getting ecosystem-based management advice, primarily because we publish lots of papers, and as you said, with the ISPRA Institute, they're running very complicated models, but if you put 2 scientists in a room, they'll have a toolbox of different models, but they won't agree whose model is right, or even whether they can run multiple models and come up with some risk summary or risk assessment. So at the moment, I think ICES itself is its own worst enemy. That we have all these tools, we're developing all this science. We could be running these models, we could be experimenting with them. The Baltic Sea is a nice example where you could start experimenting with what would the advice look like if you moved to some of these models. And I understand there are difficulties in choosing from complex models. The other aspect is we are wedded to single species reference points. If you start moving to these ecosystem-based models, you might have multi-species reference points. You might have some other different reference point, which is a concept of the ecosystem. I don't know how far ACOM is getting with discussions or thinking about these issues, but they are a radical change. I shouldn't really be saying what I'm saying because I'm not a member of ACOM. I'm ICES president, and ACOM is autonomous and SciComm is autonomous. After 30 years of giving advice to the UK, these are the problems I see. We as scientists are causing our own problems. We like to do science and we like to publish it, but we will never put a hand up and say, now I'm going to use my multi-species model. There's always reasons why you can't. And I came into fisheries in 1995, and I thought within 5 years we wouldn't be running single species models. And increasingly now, not only are we running them, we continue to polish peanuts to argue over the precision of the numbers that come out of them. So my message to ICES is if you want to help the Commission with ecosystem-based approaches, start having serious discussions about the models you do have in-house that are coming out of SciComm, and have the debate around what the consequences would be if you shifted from single species-based advice to something that's more multi-species based or mixed fishery based.
But I still want the verification, because I really had it from my colleagues that 70% of the assessments still have elements of ecosystem-based approach. I really hope that is the case. Yeah, elements, of course. No. I said it very clearly. So after this panel, I would like to know the truth.
And just to respond before I go on to Piotr, you use the word elements very carefully. So yes, I can look through the advice and I can see elements of ecosystem-based approach. I can't see quantitative numbers or quantitative implications.
No problem at all. But I still remember that ICES provided multi-species advice for the Baltic Sea in 2011 or 12, I think. It was the first attempt. The problem is I'm not an expert, so I have my own opinion. It's not science, it's just my private opinion. But the problem is that this is what I've heard. The calculations, math is possible. But the problem is, as you said, that from the single reference point, you are ending up with kind of matrix. If you prioritize, let's say, or imagine there is still Eastern Baltic cod stock in place. So if we focus or prioritize the Eastern Baltic cod stock, so we can calculate what does it mean for small pelagics, for herring and spread. So vice versa, if we want to prioritize on small pelagics, we can calculate the reference levels for the cod. And also from the principal perspective, I think MSY perspective, single species MSY perspective is not useful in the multi-species approach at all. It's not going to be a single MSY anymore. So I think what is not solved is what we do with those results of the models, how we proceed with prioritizing, how to set the system or consultations or the brainstorming, what to do with those results. That's, I guess, again, my private opinion, the major problem with implementing the multi-species approach, even in the case of the Baltic Sea, which has a limited number of commercially exploited fish stocks and relatively simple food webs. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, once again, when you're the last in line, it's difficult to say something really brilliant and inspiring that hasn't been said yet. I'll try at least. One thing I'd like to underscore is that, of course, the ecosystem approach is one of the underlying principles of everything that HELCOM does. It underpins our work. It's strongly reflected in the Baltic Sea Action Plan. And one of our important working groups is called GEAR. And it's not because it's about fisheries, which you might assume, but actually the EA in that acronym stands for ecosystem approach. So it's the group which deals with the implementation of the ecosystem approach. So that is something that's very important in our work. And if our contracting parties implement the commitments they've set for themselves, then I think we can go a long way towards actually achieving this ecosystem approach. One example of something concrete that we're doing at the moment is developing a common understanding on ecosystem-based fisheries management. That is a process currently ongoing within HELCOM. We expect to have a common understanding, or we hope to have a common understanding by the end of this year. And that will, of course, facilitate this also for the Baltic Sea region. So it is very, very important. It is an underpinning principle of everything we do at HELCOM. And when it comes to doing things at HELCOM, if I can just come back to EU funding, I would like to say that a lot of what we do is actually funded through the EU because our core budget is very, very small. And basically, with our core budget, we could come to the office, switch on the light, cook some coffee, and that's it. So since we want to do some more than that, we need external funding, and much of that funding is provided by the European Union. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much. I have no idea how we're doing for time. We're still good? Okay, very good. Clarity of mandate, clear priorities. We've also heard about the importance of practical, clear next steps. Can I ask our speakers to name one practical, clear next step?
Honestly, it is a very difficult question. But if I have to say something, this is probably on the data side, because this is the primary thing, really to try and make a good integrated network, because for the moment we have so many sources of data, so much out there, but it's so difficult to make sense of all of it and to have a coherent picture of what is out there. And this is probably the first thing that we have to make an effort. And I'm saying that because also I have a bias when I'm saying that we have science, marine science, as a very strong pillar of the European Ocean Pact. Our final flagship target is to have a digital twin of the ocean. But we cannot, it's inconceivable if we don't have the starting point, which is the data. So for me, time-wise, but also methodologically wise, it is so important to put our data right and see and map how we can make it coherent, interoperable, and useful for the various elements that we have to develop further. So.
Thank you very much. Data underpinning, yes.
Excuse me. I think, given given Piotr's comment about the multi-species models for the Baltic, which were 2011, some time ago, that there is probably hidden away in ICES reports, and I think Dave had a slide that started to list some of the Baltic reports that have been written recently. If you go back over time, there's probably a lot of reports that have been written that have elements of ecosystem approach. It's not a joke. They don't have quantitative ecosystem impacts, but they have elements that lead you in the right direction or the path to take. So we've probably done more than we think we've done. So the next step that we could do would be seriously to revisit some of that work and view the Baltic Sea as a case study of how you might implement quantitative, not qualitative, but quantitative ecosystem-based approach to fisheries management. And we do have a lot of historic models, and they've all been dropped for various reasons. But nowadays, computing power is so much better than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. You can run these models quite quickly, whereas in the past, we used to have to agonize over the inputs because it might take you 2 days to run a model and get any outputs. So I think we could go back and revisit what we have done as a community and see how that would help us go forward. So that's, I think the best thing we as scientists could do, and let the policy people develop. Well, obviously inform the policy people as we're doing it, so you start to understand what we're doing, so things become a bit clearer.
So that we start to understand.
Well, I'm not convinced that all the scientists understand, so it would be unreasonable to expect policy to understand.
Thank you, Carl.
Yeah, I was thinking based on Anna's keynote presentations that there are so many EU-funded projects that I know the Commission is also asking for providing evidence that really those results developed in the projects are implemented somehow. So maybe organizing a kind of workshop with grabbing people representing consortia, doing different kind of projects in recent years, focus on developing some of the tools, focus on well, it could be fisheries management, but also could be ecosystem-based fisheries management, or even the assessment of the state of the seas based on example of the Baltic Sea. So somebody in this room today mentioned Odem project that was used also, and it's still used methodology at least somehow to assess the pressures, impacts, and to develop more knowledge about the current state of the sea. So there were projects we were running, and Commission spent a lot of money to cover those costs. So I think once we meet in one room during 1 day or 2 days workshop, we can really come up with some ideas how to use some of those solutions or tools developed in those models for maybe better or quicker implementation of ecosystem-based management. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, once again, right? But you can mention money. I've already mentioned money. I can't go there again. But no, seriously. I think what this discussion shows, and what probably the discussions in the course of this whole exercise, which of course I only joined today, show, is that there's a lot of commitments, a lot of decisions that have been taken. So I think, in my view, from a policymaker's point of view, maybe, or somebody who implements policy, actually, I think the next step should be taking those steps that have already been agreed on. We'll never know everything. We may never know enough, but we know enough to move forward. So let's just do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeva, did you want to come in on those last 2 questions?
Yes, thank you. Indeed, I was waiting for my turn. To just a couple of remarks from administration side as well. So first of all, a quick remark, Carolina, thank you for the news that funding for science is not reduced in the new financial perspective. Very good to know. I do hope that this also applies for the data collection framework that we are deeply committed, and I think that our commitment as well is very much in line in the conference that we host this year. So what I wanted to say from our side, that I think that we could do for better integration of ecosystem approach elements in the advice and modeling. That I'm actually not a scientist, I'm a political scientist, so I cannot very much add up to that discussion. But I was thinking about the data, the strengthening of the data. We do have ideas every year, and we do think that widening the scope is very important. The quality of data, we do, I would say, invest a lot in terms of not only funding but also human resources to the quality and the scope of the data collection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yeva. A proposal before our panelists move away was to have a look together at the results of the poll from the audience.
It seems that we had 2 ideas kind of bubble up to the top in terms of particularly promising ways forward. First has to do with multidisciplinary social ecological research in the context explicitly of trade-off analyses, and therefore getting away from kind of point estimates or single numbers in the context of advice. And the second, more about marine spatial planning and integration of kind of knowledge of various pressures. So yeah, we're curious to hear, I think, how we might all kind of move forward specifically with those sets of ideas.
Perhaps we can ask or give the opportunity to Yeva first if you wanted to answer. Any comments on those results from the poll?
I would have nothing to add at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here on stage?
I think the two that are chosen are interesting. I guess my question unfortunately goes back to Charlene. If we were to develop, and we have been, ICES has been developing tools to investigate trade-offs. How would you expect advice, or what would you expect advice to look like? Would it be a tool where you in the Commission then use the tool to investigate your own trade-offs, or would you essentially give a shopping list of trade-off options to the scientists to then say to you, for this option, this is the consequence, for something else, there's another consequence, and produce the sort of outputs that Anna showed in her keynote, where things are coded as good or bad or borderline?
Probably not as simplistic, but good or bad, good or bad. Yeah, no, it's really a very nice question. I remember that we worked once upon a time in the Joint Research Center on the trade-offs related to the Sustainable Development Goals. Because whenever you have multiple driver picture, then of course you need to assess the trade-offs. And I would imagine that it can be on the basis of the cost of non-doing things and the cost of doing things, and how the constellation of drivers in a multi-driver picture will look like in terms of cost. So something like and I remember this lecture, it was very interesting for the Directors General, it was really nice. So something that is trying to reflect a complex landscape, so it cannot be too easy, so we need to learn as policymakers, we should go out of the standard simple type of thinking, but something that could really be indicative, and normally the cost or income forgone is the best way to show what it costs for one or another element. But I really like that the first one gained so much popularity. And I have to tell you that if I manage to say to our ministers and stakeholders and the sector that we finally found a way to find the right balance between the three pillars of sustainability, environmental, social, and economic, I will be just extremely happy. So this is the silver bullet for me. The second one is also very close to my heart, because I already lifted the curtain and now I see that, you know, the one that was making this presentation is here on the first row. So on the MSP side, and how to put together the MSP as Maritime Special Planning, how to put together blue economy, the cumulative impact that it makes on the ocean, the ecosystems and the ecosystem services, because they have to be in the trade-offs. We very often forget them. So if we can do that in our next generation of maritime special planning, we will be really succeeding. So the two of them are very good. Again, the question is the how. So help us with the how.
Just a quick comment based on previous talks with Raluca, 2 years and a year before. So if we want to include socio-economic consideration in the advice, I think we need to change the entire format of the way ICES is providing advice, because that could start with the biological point of view, and then based on that you have the whole suite of different scenarios and ideas how to play with the different sectors, what are the priorities and things so on. So I think it should be not a single step advice with the final social, ecological and biological advice at the end, but something in between for the further discussion, and maybe also the input from stakeholders and the Commission as well. Thank you.
Well, this time I don't really have anything to add. I'll try anyway. So first of all, we'll take this into account and take this on board because obviously it's well reasoned and it makes sense and it can support our work. And we'll take this home. And one thing I'd just like to highlight is the role of maritime spatial planning, which is very important and which is actually something that the Baltic Sea region is something of a front runner in. And in a small and crowded and busy sea, and an overexploited sea in many ways, such as the Baltic, I think maritime spatial planning is a key instrument in trying to reconcile the various conflicts or the various interests that the sea is subjected to, and that causes these issues that the sea is forced to cope with. So I just like to emphasize the importance of maritime spatial planning, which is mentioned there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm informing that we're reaching the end of this panel. I think we have really moved from why we're here, what we can do, to how we can do it. I think this is a very, very useful discussion. Thank you very much for your contribution. Let's thank our panelists. Very good. And those are the results from the WUVA app poll. Did you want to talk a little bit to this, Sarah, before I invite our distinguished guests to wrap up?
I only talk about polls. So we had also, I think earlier in the week, we had sent out a poll to all attendees at the meeting asking about what they think that should be the top priority for the Baltic in the next 5 years. So this was anyone who attended the ASC could answer this question. I think, to me, what stands out is, first of all, there was no clear front runner among the options that we kind of proposed. And secondly, we asked scientists, what they thought was most important, and usually I think you do say more data is needed. But here, that wasn't kind of the obvious winner. I think it was data in the constellation of thinking about how to get that, how to get the science into management in new ways. So those are our take-homes from sort of the larger, broader audience. And yeah, I think we're ready to wrap up for today. What? You want to say, no, we really do need more data.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And thank you to everyone who participated in the survey and in the Slido polls. I will now invite Alan Heaney to wrap up.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much to all of our speakers and panelists. That was really fantastic, and thanks to everyone who contributed. So actions, I just want to give kind of three areas here. I really appreciated some of the keywords and some kind of things that came out. I think there were about 50 things like write down, but I think the idea of patience, that Klaus mentioned and was reiterated, or just thinking about this in the recovery and how this is going to work. This idea of taking chances and moving forward, but sort of recognizing that we're all in this for the long game. But that coupled with urgency too. Charlene mentioned the idea of permanent dialogue, and I think that that's really a key place that I hope that this is part of that process, that really, this is something that we want to move towards. And Colm, mentioned new thinking, that we really have to think differently, but recognizing that it's not a radical idea to do this. 2002, when we made the Copenhagen Declaration on the 100th anniversary of ICES, we brought out a lot of these concepts. So we've been working on this in some way for a long time, but we have new tools and new ways that we can do this at a new urgency. So next thing is along that theme. So for the 125th anniversary of ICES, we'll be, as I mentioned in the opening of the ASC, we'll be developing a new strategy, and we'll have plan a large annual science conference that really will also focus on some of these big questions. So please join us for that. We'll also try to do more events like this, where we try to, in the spirit of Anna's focus on get out there and do transdisciplinarity, really try to bring more types of stakeholders into our conversation. And we hope that we can partner with DG Maria in the future to do this. Thank you very much again for helping to support this event. Really was great. And then the third thing that I'll turn it over to Raluca, I believe, in the end here. We've been working, as I mentioned, on this statement, which is really a summary of some of the messages, and this has been developed by the IC Secretariat leadership and committee leadership and Carl, the president, along with DJ Mari. So just the idea, there's an upcoming there's an Our Baltic meeting next week that will, at a ministerial level, focus on a number of the issues that we're talking about. And these are some of the science messages, some of the things that we all discussed today, that really echoing our common belief that we need to focus on the issues that we face in new ways, that we need to work together and break down the silos that exist on the science side and in the management and policy side. So with that, I'll turn it over to Raluca, who will tell you a little bit more about, show you a little bit more about the statement. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I will not keep you for long. I know it's the end of the afternoon and everyone has been engaged in very fruitful discussions. So as we've heard today, we looked at the why and what do we need to fix, what are the challenges in the Baltic, but also at the how. And I think we've heard some very valuable ideas on both fronts. Secondly, I think we all agree that science is a very stable ground for our policies, and it's a luxury to have a stable ground in policy, no matter the policy. And with this idea in mind, I wanted to re-emphasize a word that I've heard much more than expected today, and that is communication. And we do want to communicate a bit more to the general public the outcome and the general discussions that we have heard today. So that was a bit the idea behind this statement, or whatever we want to call it. It's just to leave a mark for the general public to better understand the thinking behind the actions that we are proposing. So basically, we looked at the current challenges in fisheries management, and it is very clear that the single species model has reached a term, to put it mildly. And we have seen even in the results of the polls that there is quite a large consensus around this statement, so to say. So as we are looking ahead, we need a more integrated, holistic approach that is hopefully able to reach challenges and opportunities in other sectors as well, and address risk benefits in a more holistic manner. And to tackle the key issues beyond, the fishing in the Baltic, such as climate change, eutrophication, biodiversity loss, in a more coherent manner, so to say. Then basically we are looking for an approach that makes more sense and is more adaptive, more flexible, and can be better suited to cater for complex challenges as we are facing. We are today looking at the Baltic, but probably other sea basins are equally good candidates to look for coherent and complex and comprehensive solutions. We have also heard the importance of coordination, and coordination not only within the scientific community, and thank you very much to all the people who participated from the various sides of the scientific community, be it ICES, be it FRO, or the wider public with the scientific expertise. Thank you very much to everybody. But we also talk about regional coordination in terms of more management-involved actors. So we are all there together to solve a common question. And as we are looking ahead, we need to look more like a team, so to say. So adaptive science and coordinated governance, the key to success. we can make this the new tagline, so to say. And if we were to look at potential actions, we have three, very sharp, hopefully pragmatic actions as key takeaway messages. Basically, to support the ongoing work through sustained investment in science, and here I'm not only talking about money, but also about human resource. And I'm looking in the room, there are plenty of young people, motivated, creative, to look ahead and to propose to us new solutions for the future. Then it's also important to coordinate and to look into integrating better the science and the policy. Second action is to build research capacity by uniting the efforts of ICES, HELCOM, and other, let's say, other actors in the member countries, universities, and people involved in general research. So the more we integrate, the more coherence we bring. And this is it will start to look like a joint effort, let's put it this way. And then operationalize the new tools, like the digital twin of the ocean, integrated assessments, and the ICES framework for ecosystem-informed advice. This will probably be the most complex of them all, because we will have to start working with what we have and to start building new ways of functioning together. So that's the last step, but probably the most important one. And with this, food for thought, and hopefully not only food for thought, food for action as well. I want to thank everyone who was involved in preparing this event, and I'm looking forward to meeting all of you together with my colleagues at the reception afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Raluca. So we will now be handing over to the conference closing ceremony and the revealing of the ICES Merit Awards. After the closing ceremony, participants who registered for this Baltic side event are invited to an informal reception in the Vaitikunas Hall. So that's the hall with the clock tower. Okay? Thank you very much, everyone. And yes, let's do it.